Today, on this Mastering Warhammer 40k episode, we are going to be putting an end to you missing points during your next game. So, this video is going to be tailored more towards a player who is just beginning or just starting out in 40k, or maybe you've been playing for a little bit and you're just looking to improve your game in some ways. I'm going to be using a variety of units from different armies today to demonstrate this concept in great detail and go over the tactics and strategies related to scoring more points overall throughout your game. And this is mainly going to be talking about the secondary points, not so much on the primary points. That would probably be an entirely different video. So if you find yourself missing points like on containment or cleanse or recover assets, stuff like that, you're going to stick around because I think you're going to get a lot of value out of this video today. So without further ado, let's get into it. We're going to be covering three main things today that I like to think about when we're going over secondaries. The first being is going to be the deployment. Is absolutely crucial when you're talking about those early game secondaries. The second thing is going to be pre-visualizing the objective for that turn. And the third thing that we're going to talk about is thinking about the late game. All right, so let's get into it here. We have a map of TTS open, and TTS stands for Tabletop Simulator, and we are in just your standard layout 1. This is GW layout 1 as well. This is Crucible Battle GW layout 1. And I think this is a good map to showcase some things as far as when it comes to certain secondary objectives and maybe how you could misdeploy as far as points. So the first thing we're going to go over again is deployment. And I am primarily a Necron player, but I will be showcasing other units from other armies throughout this video so you get a better visual of these topics and how it relates to maybe your game at home as well. So first things first, I am going to think about containment is the first thing that's usually going through my mind. So basically what I mean by this is when we're going first, whether we're going top of one or bottom of one, what two units are we bringing out that first turn to make sure that we score containment? So on this layout specifically, it's kind of nice because of the fact that you have a nice wall here where you can essentially have a Holy Within 9 here and Holy Within 9 here. And so what this means is more or less is that you can a lot of times squeeze a unit here and a unit here to get a double contain, all right, which is really nice. The other thing that we're thinking about as far as objectives is we're thinking about area denial. So I'm going to need something that's going to be within 3 inches of the objective here. Let me do a better example of that. And then also we're thinking about locus, right? So that's going to be 6 inches within the objective more or less here, okay? Now these are rough ideas here as far as like visuals, but this center circle is area denial. This circle right here is locus, okay? The other thing that we're thinking about is, of course, engage on all fronts, right? So we're dividing the plane into 4 quarters, all right? So essentially what we're doing here is we know that we need to get a unit potentially over here if we want engage on all fronts, or a unit over here to get engage on all fronts. A lot of times it's a little bit difficult to get 4 points on engage on all fronts the first turn, but it's possible, okay? The next thing that we're thinking about, we're just kind of going down the list here, is recover assets, okay? So we need a unit that is going to be in our deployment zone, and then 1 unit that's out of our deployment zone. So if you're an army that has access to lone ops, this is why they are extremely valuable in the early game, because a lot of times you can just put them right outside your deployment zone and your opponent has really no way to interact with them or shoot them, which is great. So we're looking for good area denial opportunities where, or sorry, not area denial, but recover assets pockets where you have a nice pocket potentially right here or right here. Or you could do a recover assets over here as well. That would probably be one of the best places to do it. And so you have 1 unit over here, and then maybe you have like a unit in your deployment zone, okay? Defend, you can't score on the first turn. Storm Hostile, you can't score. Overwhelming Force, you technically can. A lot of the kill secondaries are going to be highly situational, so I wouldn't beat yourself up over that as far as like if you, let you get no prisoners and bring it down the first turn and you're going first. I mean, sometimes that just is what it is. In those situations, I would highly recommend that you cycle one of those cards the first turn just to maybe get a card that you can score. And just not getting a full 0 on primary, but sometimes, or excuse me, secondary, but sometimes that just happens, okay? And don't get frustrated or flustered. It happens to the best of us. But we're mainly specifically talking about those games, especially on the first turn in deployment. You do not want to miss any points on your positional secondaries or action secondaries, okay? And then one of the last ones that we're thinking about here is also extend battle lines, secure no man's land, and cleanse. All right. So like cleanse, again, you're getting these objectives, same thing with extend battle lines and covering there. Okay. So now that we have these circles out, let's start just putting these units down here. Now I'm gonna do this fairly quickly here because I don't want to be here for 2 hours, and that's not why you all come here. You're like, yo, just give us the good content, and help us learn something, and we will be forever grateful. So that's what we're gonna do. So we're gonna put these units out here in typical fashion, and I'm gonna explain from kind of like a macro perspective, why this works, fairly well. So mainly, okay, so let's start thinking about containment. So over here, there's a couple different ways you can do this on this layout, at least like with my list, is you could have like a unit of flayed ones over here. You could have like a locust destroyer and like an independent Scorpec Lord, because you're trying to make sure that both of these units can fit in this circle, okay, is mainly what we're looking for. So you have to pre-visualize this beforehand, okay, especially for these points. I wouldn't want to ideally put a unit out here. A lot of newer players might think to do something like that, but the problem is that it's very easy for your opponent to come out of their deployment zone and you just lose that resource for free. Anytime that you can score points in Warhammer without having to lose anything in return is really, really good value, especially on the first turn. So in an ideal scenario, we're looking to not lose units and still score points. So at least with this list, there's a couple different ways to do that. If we're not playing Necrons, this could be like if you're playing Tau, maybe you have like a unit of stealth suits or stealth battle suits, and maybe they already infiltrated up past this wall, and then you're looking for like another unit to just double contain over there. This could be like your lictors for Tyranids, that sort of thing. All of those units would be great for doing something like containment first turn. All right. So the next thing we're looking at is engage in all fronts. Now, some armies are really good at doing this. Some armies are not. So like I play Necrons. Sometimes this is a good card to draw depending on the matchup, where we have our infiltrators out like flayed ones. And let's say like on this layout, a lot of times I would put them here. But maybe it's like a more aggressive matchup, and I needed to make sure like let's say I was playing against World Eaters, and I knew I needed to deny their scout moves from their Exalted 8-bound, and I put the flayed ones in a more aggressive position. Like in this case, it'd be a lot easier for me to get engaged on all fronts on the first turn. But it's going to be situational. So the one thing I would say about engage on all fronts is, especially on the first turn, is yes, it's great if you can score it, but also just think about your game plan, because it is only 2 points for that card. So engage on all fronts and cleanse are not secondaries when I'm going first that I'm in particular very excited about, or I feel like I absolutely need to score this, because a lot of times if your opponent draws like no prisoners or overwhelming force or something like that in the first turn, those cards are usually like a wash, or sometimes you're actually indirectly giving your opponent more points. Cleanse is a really good example of this. So like if you're putting flayed ones on the objective to cleanse the first turn, maybe you're putting again stealth suits on the objective, maybe you're putting if you're an orc player, maybe you're putting Gretchen on the objective up here to cleanse. A lot of times this is situational where if they draw overwhelming force that next turn, now you're just handing them like an easy 3 points, where now they're netting like an extra point, just because you cleanse with like a resource that isn't very durable. So thinking about also the units that you're putting on these objectives for scoring these points is very crucial. But again, going back to the first point of in deployment, you can see how if you don't set up or if you don't deploy your army correctly, you can really miss out on a lot of points. Where if you don't, if you didn't put like enough, like let's say you only put one unit over here, right? Like let's say you are like the like a Votan player, and you have your land fort, one of your land forts over here, because a lot of times Votan, they're running like 2 land forts, and you didn't have anything else over here, and you like potentially gypped yourself out of a containment. I see that happen all the time, where you can only fit like 1 unit over here or just 1 unit in this corner, and you only got 3 points. So when it's a card that you could have very easily gotten 6 if you planned ahead of time. And this is what we're getting at. This is why I'm making this video, because I don't want to see you guys making those mistakes. So again, first topic, think ahead. Mainly think about your positional secondary, so your containment, your cleanse, your extend battle lines, your secure no man's land, your engage in all fronts, your area denial, your locus, okay? Making sure you're pre-measuring units. I do this all the time, where you're measuring 14 inches from the center of the objective. The main reason I'm measuring 14 is because I know my Xeris or a hex mark moves 8, and then it gets him 6 within the center. So I'll intentionally leave him 14 away. So if I need to move him up, 8 inches, and then go over here to, oops, rotated the screen here. Sorry about that. Let me here. Oh, we're moving our guy. There we go. Okay. So if I'm moving him over, making sure I get him within 6 inches to do locus. So thinking about those positional secondaries beforehand is really going to help minimize you missing out on points in your deployment and going into your first turn, because I see it happen all the time. The second thing that we want to think about is pre-visualizing the board, okay? Now, what I mean by that is let's say the game has, sorry about that. The game is developed, okay? So we're going into like turn 2, okay? And, let's say we're playing against World Eaters, and, he's got Angron stage up over here. Maybe he's got some like Exalted 8-bound, or maybe he's got Angron here. He's got some 8-bound here, okay? Let's say he's got another unit of 8-bound, or something right here staged up. Okay. So again, we're just like, this is just a learning opportunity. I'm not saying this is like ideal board state or anything like that, but we're talking concepts here today. Okay. So we can learn. So we're talking about pre-visualizing the board beforehand. Another thing that I see very common is you draw your secondaries, and you're moving through your turn, and then halfway through, you completely forget about what your secondaries were or what you were doing, okay? And you see this with beginning players all the time, even players that have been playing maybe for like a little bit. And I would just strongly recommend I know it's not easy, but just trying to get out of that habit. And really at the start of every turn, after you're doing your battle shock test, you're looking at primary, everything else, you're drawing your secondaries, okay? And, let's just say, for example, I draw, bring it down, and no prisoners, okay? And I'm looking at the board, and I'm like, oh, man, okay, Angron would be just a great target for bringing down, but unfortunately, there's literally no way I can interact with him this turn. Let's say I don't really have any strong melee threat. Let's say he's got like these Exalted 8-bound, like lining 1 inch away from the wall. And there's just really no way I can interact with Angron. And so I'm thinking about these secondaries ahead of time versus halfway through my turn when I'm like, you realize you're like, oh man, there really is no way I can interact with Angron. Or there really is no way that I can get no prisoners because I can't connect with these Exalted 8-bound. All right. So thinking about those secondaries, and pre-visualizing the board and looking at your pieces and being like, okay, realistically, can I score these? And if I can't, is it worth me cycling it? And the second thing is, if I can, how am I exactly going to do that? And really thinking about, okay, exactly, you know, where do I need to move my pieces to do that? So stuff that I'm thinking about, I'm like, okay, well, before moving the Silent King, can I move him over here and potentially draw a line like over this way and get Angron? Okay, no, that's not an option. So that's not even going to be on the table. You know, you're doing things like that where it's like, okay, what things can move where to get lines of sight to kill certain things? Or let's say, I get extend battle lines and area denial, right? That's always a really tricky one where, you know, let's say he's got a really durable, let's say we're playing against Votan, right? And I draw area denial and he's got this super beefy land fort, just like center of the table. And he's got like a brick of 10 guys inside of like Hearthkin or something like that. And I'm like, man, I got to chew through this land fort and I got to get through this 10 brick to even think about scoring area denial. That's one that usually trips a lot of people up because you really got to know, can I for sure kill this, or is it something that I need to cycle? And so I would just behoove you to really spend a little bit more time at the beginning of your turns and pre-visualizing the board. Think about each one of your units, whether you're playing Necrons, you're playing World Eaters, you're playing Tau, you're playing Tyranids, and just really think about, okay, can my army, where it is right now, really get rid of this land fort? Or is there a way that I can interact with Angron over here and get him off the board? All right. And then start moving your pieces. This is really going to help minimize mistakes throughout the game. It's really going to help you form a better game plan before going into your turn and not getting flustered. Because at the end of the day, Warhammer is always about points, okay? And knowing what your list can do and what your list can't do. So, like with my list, there's certain secondaries where I'm just like, if I see these secondaries, a lot of times I'm just going to cycle them. Like Mark for Death, I know I'm just going to cycle it. A lot of times Cleanse, I'm just going to cycle it. If I draw behind enemy lines in the early game and I'm playing against, GSC or Tyranids, I know for sure there's no way in heck I'm getting in their deployment zone, and I'm just going to cycle it, okay? Because I know there's probably going to be another card in there that my army is more equipped to actually score points. Because again, at the end of the day, we're just trying to score points. You just score more points than your opponent, you win. It's not about tabling your opponent or killing the most. I mean, sometimes it is. That helps. I'm not going to lie. But at the end of the day, you just got to score some points. All right. So the first thing, again, deployment. Really thinking about those positional secondaries. Okay. Thinking about those positional secondaries, running them through in your head. We all have these iPhones here. I would honestly, if you have the Notes app or if you're on Android, Androids are great too. I am biased. I am smartphone biased, but honestly, have a note on your phone, like literally like a Warhammer note section, and just list off containment, engage in all fronts, cleanse, all those positional secondaries, and just deploy as if, until you memorize them in your mind. And just deploy accordingly, and you will be shocked at how much that will help over time when you practice that, and then you won't forget it, which is great. So, and then the second thing, again, pre-visualizing the board, like we just talked about. So before your turn goes in, really thinking about, okay, these are the two secondaries I have for the turn. How am I exactly going to accomplish these? And if I can't, which ones do I need to cycle? And the third thing is thinking about the late game. All right. Now, when it comes to the late game, what we're talking about here is units like my Hexmark with the Veil of Darkness. These are units like your Mandrakes, okay, for like Drukhari. Okay, so we have some Mandrakes over here. We have what else do we have here? Like your did I bring him in here? Let's see. Don't know if I brought him in here or not. But your Mandrakes, like your Ophidians, anything that's like an up-down mechanic, where they can go up at the end of your opponent's turn and they drop back down somewhere. Those units, you're really trying to make sure that you keep alive until rounds 4 and 5, because that's when they really get a lot of their value. I think at least having one of these units in your army, if you have access to it, is like is I would almost say it's an auto include. It's part of the reason why I love having the hex mark with the Veil of Darkness, because it allows him once per game to come up and then come back down. But if you're playing like another army, let's say like Drukhari, Mandrakes, or same type of thing, where you save them for the late game, and let's say you draw Sabotage, let's say you draw Recover Assets, and a lot of times in rounds 4 and 5, your opponent has lost a lot of their army. They've lost a lot of their resources, where their board control isn't as strong anymore, and they have a lot more pockets that are open. Okay, because they've shifted a lot of their resources up throughout the game. I mean, you guys have played enough Warhammer now where, you know, going especially into round 5, I mean, there's units everywhere. Sometimes, like, you know, the board has flip-flopped and the enemy's like, you know, over like in your deployment zone here, and you have units over here. It's just a mess, like, everywhere sometimes. And because of that, it does leave these little pockets in areas where it's a lot easier for you to score. So if you draw, you know, I mean, even Locust turn 5, Sabotage and Recover, some of the biggest ones. This even happened in my tournament, or my GT a couple weekends ago, where the hex mark always comes in so clutch, where all of a sudden, let's say you draw Sabotage turn 5, okay, and you save this for the end. Again, this is thinking about the late game. I picked him up, I drop him down here, boom, automatic 6 points. Where if I had gotten greedy and picked him up early and maybe like sacrificed him for, you know, just killing a couple guys and then he just died, he didn't serve me any good. Or maybe like he, you know, was like engaged in all fronts for like 2 points, and it's like, you know, is that really worth it? A lot of times I'll always save these pieces, or always try to save these type of units for the late game for scoring secondary, because they're, if you really think about these units, they're doing 3 jobs at once in your list, which is why they have so much value. They are screening the board, okay? Like if I just keep this unit of Mandrakes here spread out the entire game, right? These units of 5 are so clutch. I mean, look at this. Like they're screening 9 out this way. They're screening 9 out this way. This way they're covering so much of the board. So you're indirectly like helping deny secondary points from your opponent. They're also a unit that your opponent has to respect the entire game, where they want to keep resources in their backline, because they know if you come back there, you're going to get easy points. If this unit's dead, then they don't have to worry about it anymore. They're like, all right, like whatever, cool. And then the third thing is that, like I just said, if you draw Sabotage, if you draw Recover Assets, a lot of times that's going to be 6 freaking points on that objective, especially if you're going bottom of turn 5. I mean, it's great. I mean, it's such good value. It's same thing with the hex mark. A lot of times, like, I won't pick him up until turn 5, or you use his ability, because I know it's going to maximize his value, and it gives me the most options to score. Okay. So again, fully summarizing here, as far as like maximizing your secondary points. So deployment, really visualizing the board for those key secondaries, you know, freaking put a document like on your phone to help remember while you're deploying, or if you're playing against a buddy coming up this week, or maybe you're going to like a local RTT coming up this weekend. And then the second thing is you want to pre-visualize the board state going into your turn. Really think about those secondaries, how I'm going to accomplish them. And then the third thing is, if you can have a unit in your list, if your army has access to it, any sort of up-down utility unit like Ophidians, like Mandrakes, like Hexmarks with the Veil, highly, highly recommend getting a unit like that in your list, because they are usually so efficient in so many ways for their points. So on that, if you stuck around this long, I appreciate you watching. And yeah, let me know what you thought of the video before. Let me know what you thought of the video today, if I could talk. And then feel free to drop a comment below of something that you would like to see on a Mastering 40k episode in the future. Definitely like talking about these and kind of taking these smaller concepts and really fleshing them out in great detail to just help you guys improve your game. So other than that, again, appreciate y'all hanging out, and we'll catch you in the next one.